Borderlands Pre Sequel is a game made by 2K Australia and Gearbox Software in 2014. Despite its very good reviews on release, fans of the franchise still think it's a bit of a mixed bag. So join me as we try and figure out what went right and what went wrong with this game. One of the main strengths of the game is the roster of characters you can choose to play as. All playable characters that you can potentially play as are from different entries of the series. So you'll see some of them in Borderlands 2 coming up, or maybe Borderlands 3 in the future. So it's really nice to see where these characters started out and unfortunately where most of them end up. Speaking of Borderlands 2, as that game came before this one, they've had to change up the gameplay a little bit just to keep it fresh. One of the best inclusions in my opinion in this game was the inclusion of Oz kits. The reason why I love Oz kits in this game is because they provide so much mobility within the game, it's ridiculous. Since most areas have no gravity or oxygen, etc., you float around and stuff, and obviously during these areas you get shot at by with lasers and bullets and all that stuff. So as you're dodging and weaving, you just feel like an action hero or something. They also added laser guns, which in themselves are really fun to mess around with. They also added freeze damage as an elemental effect, which in itself is very overpowered. Mainly because when you freeze an enemy, they are frozen in place for 10 seconds or so, and they can't do anything. So you can literally freeze an enemy, wail on them with bullets, grenades, your grandma, anything, and they won't do anything about it. It is ridiculous. What makes it even better is when they're frozen, they can take extra damage from certain sources, like explosive for example. So you can just change to an explosive weapon after they're frozen, and they're just done for. You've literally won the game. That's it. The storyline within the game I find quite interesting because it sort of goes over how Handsome Jack became who he is. So throughout the story we get to see Handsome Jack ascend the ranks of the Hyperion Corporation whilst also descending into madness, which I found to be a really strong parallel. And you also get to see why he sort of hates everyone that you're affiliated with in the second game. So overall, in terms of storyline, I think it's quite memorable. But alas, there are a few characters in this story which I find infuriating to listen to. One of the main culprits of this has to be Pickle, who's like an 8-year-old boy who's proper cockney for some reason.
There's some work needs doing if you're up for it. I'll admit I heard stories about sub-level 13 in the old doll factory that made me shiver. But that didn't stop me from sending my mate Harry to recover a space fold inverter I got wind of.
Granted, he's only around for a couple of quests, which is a really good idea on Gearbox, thank you for that. But in the quests he is in, he doesn't stop talking. And I think that's an issue for most of the game, to be fair. Most characters just don't know when to stop talking, and it drags on quite a bit. And the thing is, it's not like Gearbox doesn't know how to write a good child character. Now look at Tiny Tina. She's similar in terms of annoyance, granted, but she does have a character at the end of the day. Pickle is literally just a cockney kid, and that is literally all the characterisation they need apparently. What makes it even worse is in the DLC there's a gun that always spouts out his voice lines, so you can have it in your inventory, take it out, and you just hear Pickle every 5 seconds, and it's genuinely not a fun time. Unfortunately, when it comes to quests in the game, it's quite forgettable all around, to be fair, which I find quite disappointing. But there are a few exceptions to this. For example, there's a Ghostbusters Easter egg quest which I found very, very enjoyable. And there's a basketball quest where you slam dunk yourself through a hoop, which I found very, very funny. And there's all the Professor Nakayama quests that I found really hilarious too. It's just a shame that these are the only sets of quests that I can remember from this game. I think another main positive about this game is the storyline DLC. First of all, the DLC adds 10 more levels to your characters. You can become even more overpowered. And just like the main game, the DLC storyline is also very, very good. You get really funny quest lines within the DLC, and also within the main story of the DLC, you also have quests that sort of put things into perspective of Claptrap himself. And obviously with Claptrap being one of the most annoying characters in the franchise, it sort of solidifies the point of Gearbox knowing how to make annoying characters seem more redeemable or useful in some sort of way. And unfortunately this is the only storyline DLC made for this game, which kinda sucks, because if they had more storyline DLC of that quality, I can assure you this game would probably still be talked about today. The main difference between Borderlands 2 and this game is the amount of content within both games. For example, Borderlands 2 has an immense amount of DLCs, raid bosses, all sorts of things to keep you occupied throughout the journey, whereas Borderlands Pre Sequel literally has the main storyline, the DLCs, and that's really it. Maybe one boss, that's it. And with Borderlands 2 you have like a difficulty spike of all these different raid bosses and stuff, but with Borderlands Pre Sequel it's overall quite easy to play. But in terms of overall quality, you can always tell which one's better, because on Borderlands 2 you'll still have people playing it, whereas Pre Sequel I tried looking for online games and I couldn't find any. I'm not saying Borderlands Pre Sequel is a waste of your time, I just think it's a waste of potential. I've personally replayed this game many times and I've loved every single playthrough, but unfortunately the game does have a lot of flaws within it. For example, the frame rate, especially in co-op play, goes ballistic sometimes in certain scenarios. Also, getting specific loot in this game is also very tricky sometimes. Like, they added the grinder mechanic, which can be good, but when most of the good legendary weapons or the best weapons are locked behind a random chance of getting a gun from the grinder itself, which also means you need 3 more legendaries on top of that to make that gun, it gets kind of tedious after a while trying to get one gun you need. Unfortunately, because the game came out after 2, it had a lot of hype behind it and a lot of expectations that needed to be met. It must have been hard for the developers at the time, because the previous game in the series was Borderlands 2, aka the best in the series. Borderlands Pre Sequel did a lot of things right, but they also did a lot of things wrong. And overall, is it a bad game? No, at least I don't think so. Could it have been better? Absolutely. Could it have been better than Borderlands 2? We will never know. But what I do know is the game's fun, and as a gamer myself, that's all a game really needs to be. I would personally get the Handsome Jack collection, which also has Borderlands 2 within it, so you have all the DLCs with both games. So to summarise, Borderlands the Pre-Sequel is not a bad game, but compared to the other games in the franchise, it does come up short quite a bit. But I would say the game is worth playing because it is quite fun. A huge thank you to everyone that's still watching this video and also continuing to hear me ramble. As it's my first video I'm making, it might have a few mistakes in, so if there's any mistakes please let me know in the comments and I can try and work on it next time. And if there's any games or any sort of media you want me to review next, please let me know in the comments. I hope you all have a very nice day and I hope to see you next time. Take care and adios. I've done it again, I've fucked up, I pressed the wrong button.